You're listening to another episode of the Turn Autism Around podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Barbera, and today I have a guest, Caitlyn Bird, who has a degree in animal biology with a minor in psychology. We're talking all about animals and how we can use animals either as emotional support animals, as therapy dogs, or as service dogs for our kids with autism, or even as pets. We talk all about animals and how to train them to be the best support for your children with autism. Before I get to that interview with Caitlyn, I am thrilled to have just found this 5-star rating and review for the podcast. If you haven't written your own review, I would love it if you go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening and give me a rating and review. Okay, so this woman, who I don't know what her name is, said, "Mary, thank you for your dedication to this field. All of us are so fortunate to have your knowledge, guidance, and experience. Some good things came from COVID. As a dietitian and history working in public health with children, I recognized that something was off. I had been home more with my son and recognizing lack of speech, eye contact, and imitation. I couldn't understand why my son couldn't say mama, requesting and wanting me. This is my first and only son, 21 months old now, and he was diagnosed with ASD 2 months ago during COVID. Luckily, I searched high and low to get the appropriate resources and came across the podcast. Then I took Mary's toddler course and never looked back. Within a month, our son's words increased, making eye contact, responding to his name, social play, and interaction with others all improved. It's so amazing. I'm so grateful for what you do." So that makes me so happy to read this. I do a podcast every week and a video blog, and I'm hoping to find people like this woman, hoping that they find my resources, hoping that they enroll in my online courses and community. I'm seeing so many gains, especially during the COVID shutdown when so few resources are available. So if you are searching for more information besides just my podcast and my free information that's out there, I would love it if you would attend a free workshop to learn more about how you can learn the strategies to truly start turning things around. You can go to marybarbera.com/workshop. Now, let's get on with the interview with Caitlyn Bird, all about how to use animals and how to help our kids with autism. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us today, Caitlyn.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, so I don't know much about you, but we just determined that we live within an hour of each other, which is kind of cool. So Caitlyn, why don't you tell our listeners about your fall into the autism world and also into the world of animal training, specifically at training animals for kids with autism?
Yeah, so it's been quite a journey for me personally. It's definitely something that, as you said, you've kind of fell into. And initially, I got started with exotic animals. I got started learning a lot about ABA and behavior modification, which I know you're quite the expert about yourself. And after I kind of started getting into dog training, and as I started doing dog training, I got more and more inquiries about service dog training. And I had a couple people come with me. They've been with me for a while. And we ended up forming a little group here locally in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. And, some of these individuals are training their own service dogs for their own disabilities, such as even, adults or young adults with autism. So I got really interested in learning about specifically, what is an autism assistance dog? How does this help people? And it's so funny because as I was listening to a previous podcast with you, I believe her name was Denise with Functional Nutrition, you guys were talking about how ADHD and autism have similar ways that they kind of mesh together, right?
Mhm.
And several years ago, I was diagnosed late in my life with ADHD. So as I was learning more about autism and how these dogs can help individuals and even children and parents with children who have autism, it was absolutely amazing about how many kinds of similarities there are. So I decided I wanted to focus on helping parents who have children with autism to help make their lives easier and understand them and reduce the stress and really reduce meltdowns, because that's one of the amazing things that autism assistance dogs can help their children with.
Wow. So with your background with exotic animals and now with dogs and other animals, um, we were talking before we hit the record button here that you use positive approaches like Karen Pryor's clicker training and those sorts of things. So um, what's the difference if someone's taking their dog to obedience lessons? How can you tell if that trainer uses positive approaches or not?
That is, a great question that I think a lot of people need to be aware of and ask themselves as well. Because a lot of people, they say they have a dog or they have a puppy with a problem, right? And they've let that problem fester over time, and now they just need it solved. And they're in such a rush to try and get it solved, they will do anything by any means to get that issue solved, whether it be jumping up, whether it be play biting, whether it be barking, whether it just be overall, hyperactivity. And you really want to look for somebody who tells you the reasons why they're doing it and really takes the time to connect with you, right? They show their passion by connecting with you and showing empathy towards your animal. That's really what you want to be looking for out of a trainer.
Yeah, and they need to be using positive behavioral approaches and strategies and like not yelling, not suggesting like choke collars and those sorts of things. Not, oh well, if your puppy has an
Those are a big
accident.
one these days. E-collars are huge these days.
Yeah, not suggesting to rub the dog's nose in poop if he has an accident. I mean, those are things that I'm not even a pet owner, and I know some animal trainers, use some of those techniques. And just as we use positive behavior strategies for our kids, we want to make sure that the animals that are in our homes are getting trained with the same positive approaches.
Yes.
I fell into learning more about clicker training and tag teach years ago, actually in 2009. Teresa McKeon, who's the creator of Tag Teach, who did a podcast episode with me that's very good. We'll link that in the show notes here. And I think it was 2009, she asked me to present at the ABA conference on the use of Tag Teach we didn't really know what my presentation was going to be about because I was like a fill-in for somebody that was having some pregnancy issues. So I was like, oh, sure, I'll go. I'll present on Tag Teach, knowing, I took the online course and I knew a little bit about it. And she goes, oh, great. Julie Vargas will be the discussant. Now, Julie Vargas is B.F. Skinner's daughter.
Oh, cool.
And I was just like, oh my goodness, now I'm really have to, stress out about what I'm. So anyway, to make a very long story short, I use Tag Teach, which is a clicker, a positive behavior strategy. It's excellent to teach my then 14-year-old son how to tie his shoes. And then I presented that at the ABA conference in front of Julie Vargas. And so that is, we can link that in the show notes too. I have a whole video about when I taught him. He just turned 24 this month, Lucas did. And so this is a decade ago of me teaching him to tie his shoes. using tag teach and clickers and positive strategy. So
That's so funny, Mary. When I'm teaching my students about shaping plans, and you're doing the clicker training with the shoe tying, that's actually an exact example I have people write out, is what are the steps to break down to tie your shoe and how do you shape that? That's
yeah,
you're mentioning
excellent. And that is why one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, where you are going to talk about how you train autism assistance dogs and how you coach families to train their own dogs to be autism assistance dogs, which I think is really a unique thing. But I couldn't help myself to kind of tie it into some of the things we're doing, because obviously my approach, my Turn Autism Around approach is child friendly, is positive. And if I've been in homes in the past where the dogs aren't being treated in a positive manner, it really upsets me. Even as a non-pet owner, I'm just like, I think if everybody, if the parents are treating each other positively, if everyone's treating the dog positively, or the cat or any other animal, if the kids are being treated in a positive manner, it's going to create a positive environment that is happier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely, understand where you're coming from, because where your mindset is for one person or being or, creature under your care, right? No matter, who it is, it's going to translate and trickle either up or down in that family. So, I mean, I 100% agree with you that it's really important to have the right mindset going into it, because it's applicable to everyone, every person, every animal under your care, and even to yourself. You have to give yourself some leeway and some positive reinforcement from time to time as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I know there's a lot of confusion. I even have a lot of confusion about how animals can be used to improve the lives of children, especially children with autism. And I know there's like family pets and therapy dogs and companion dogs and service dogs and even emotional support animals at this point. I know my son, Spencer, who was just on a podcast episode a couple weeks ago on sibling issues. Spencer was an RA. He, lived in the dorms and managed people in a dorm. And there's a lot of recently kids going to college with emotional support animals in the dorms. And I think it presents a lot of issues with, okay, you have a roommate and all those things. So can you tell us about animals and service animals and kind of where all the animals fit into this pyramid?
Yes. And I love that you're asking this question, because there is so much misunderstanding, miseducation, wrong information out there. I'm here, I really want to help clear a lot of this up for you. And a lot of these terms get thrown around. So there's three really main kind of assistance dogs we have to be thinking about. So there's emotional support animals, there's therapy dogs, and then there are service dogs. And each and every one of these animals have clear and distinct jobs and abilities to where they are allowed to go based on law. So the very first one is emotional support animals, right? Like you said, those are becoming really popular these days. You're seeing a lot of people go the emotional support animal route. So an emotional support animal is just that, right? It is an animal for emotional support. And there is no certification for an emotional support animal. However, you do get prescribed an emotional support animal from someone of authority that you're working with, whether that be a psychologist, psychiatrist. Sometimes I see people get prescriptions even from physicians, right? It just kind of depends on, who that authority is you're getting it from. So you do need a prescription from somebody that you're working with one-on-one. Okay, there are no online registries. You have to be really careful, because there's a lot of scams out there that profess that they are the, you know, the authority on the subject, but you really have to do your research. So that's an emotional support animal, right? They provide emotional support to one individual.
And that doesn't have to just be a dog. That could be a cat.
Yes, cat, goldfish, iguana.
Oh, it could be any of those.
It could be, right. So it all falls under the umbrella of animal, right? Emotional support animal.
Okay. And that also, if you have a prescription for an emotional support animal, and you can, you know, potentially take the animal to college or take the animal physically on the plane, where some animals would have to go into the
Yeah.
carrier.
Yes, and I love
that presents challenges too.
Yes. Well, and I love that you bring this up too, Mary, because some people think that because they have a prescribed emotional support animal, it allows them to go to places where animals aren't normally allowed, like Walmart or the hairdresser, right? And that's not the case at all. That is specifically reserved for service dogs, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But an emotional support animal lawfully can be in housing and can travel. So planes, trains, automobiles.
We took a cruise. Our family took a cruise two summers ago. I actually won the cruise. I won the vacation.
Oh, congratulations.
For being Jeff Walker's Launch Club spokesperson of the year. A couple of years ago. So we took a family vacation on a cruise, and literally at the dining room, I guess because the cruise is travel, somebody had this little dog in a baby carriage, like at dinner on the cruise. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I've seen everything.
A lot of people think they're allowed in restaurants and things, which unfortunately, you know, emotional support animals are not. That is reserved for the service dogs.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you cleared that up, because I'm getting confused as to.
There's a lot of confusion out there.
Okay. All right. So emotional support animals, and then you would need to kind of show documentation of your prescription for it.
Yes.
Not a certification or anything else.
Yes. Especially if you're applying for housing or if you're looking to travel. You definitely need to have that paperwork on you.
Yeah. But what about somebody sitting next to you in the plane, or your college roommate that you get randomly assigned to? What about them?
That's definitely kind of, so there are already a lot of guidelines for flights, right? So really the DOT updated this, I believe, late January this year, where they do let airlines figure out on their own what paperwork they want to have for requiring emotional support animals on. Now you're going to have to do some of that research on your own, right? You need to be prepared, because every airline is going to be a little bit different. However, the majority of airlines need to make sure that the animal's well behaved and has that prescription note on them.
Okay.
Now, the same thing with campuses. That's going to be up to the campus to kind of decide with that. It is a dorm thing. It is kind of shared. So that's something you're going to have to plan for beforehand, because there are some situations that are just so specific and unique that you need to do that research and prepare. But for things like, housing, an emotional support animal, as long as they've got their basics like potty training, they're basically well behaved, and you have that support paperwork, you are allowed to have them in housing that doesn't typically allow pets.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the second type of assistance animals, and that be therapy dogs. And I know Lucas has been exposed, some of my clients have been exposed to therapy dogs, where they visit the schools or they visit, any kind of workplace.
Yeah, schools, geriatric homes. So I've even seen people go to places where there's disaster relief to provide therapy. So a therapy dog is kind of like a tier above an emotional support animal, in that they do really need to be trained, much more so than a emotional support animal. And there are places out there where they, there are organizations out there that help with therapy dogs and coordinate and provide standards of training as well. So one of those organizations is Therapy Dog International. And one of the beginning requirements to even start, you know, being a dog from Therapy Dog International is to get your CGC, which is Canine Good Citizen. So, you know, basic stuff like sit down, stay, polite greetings, not pulling towards dogs or animals, those kinds of things. So they're kind of in the middle tier where they need to have some training. And the job of a therapy dog, right? Because remember, an emotional support animal's job is to provide emotional support to one person. A therapy dog is to provide emotional support to many people.
And many strangers too.
Many strangers too, yes.
And many people touching them and petting them, and they just have to, like, you know, stand there and take it.
They have to love their work. Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm sure you've seen them over at libraries with, you know, sitting down, reading to kids and whatnot. Hospitals, that's another common places where people will take their therapy dog. And it's a really fulfilling thing to do with the dog.
So if you have a therapy dog, is that like one trainer, one owner, that they come as a pair? Like you can't just like go down and pick up a therapy dog, Grover, and take him to a hospital. Like you have to have a relationship with Grover.
Yes, yes. In every case that I've seen, they've all been pets owned by a person.
Right. And they come at kind of as a team. Okay. All right. So I know the biggest thing you want to talk about today, which I think is the best thing we can learn too, is service dogs and autism assistance dogs, and what are they all about? How do we proceed if we want to look more into that?
Yes, so service dogs is kind of an umbrella term for all the different types of dogs that perform to help a person live their daily life. So you have mobility assistance dogs, diabetic alert dogs, you have PTSD dogs, you have allergy detection dogs, right? And one of the ones that I'm sure your audience is most interested in learning about are autism assistance dogs. And they are a kind of service dog. So let me kind of talk about the broad umbrella of service dog first and foremost, right? So in general, service dogs they require the most amount of training. Very intensive, every day, for up to 1 or 2 years. You know, depending on the dog and the service. Yeah, yep. And it takes a lot of manpower, it takes a lot of consistency, it takes a lot of skill to fully train a reliable service dog. And the ways that these dogs help people are many, right? And the reasons why they're allowed in places pets aren't typically allowed is because they go through all this intensive training, and because they help this person live their life to as close as normal as they can.
So I'm familiar with service dogs that are like trained, you know, somewhere, and then you get the dog and then it assimilates into your family and your child, and maybe there's some crossover training, but you specialize in actually having the family train their pet or get a pet and train them as an autism assistance dog. And is that like a certification?
So it's more of an education, right? So there is no certification required by the ADA for a service dog, right? That's why any individual can train their own service dog. However, it's a big task, right? A lot of people struggle with that. And a lot of people who have applied to some of these organizations, you know, they still need you to fit within a box in order to do certain things. Or they need you, maybe if you're a single parent or you're both work full-time, they need you to go to do that transfer training, and maybe you can't always do that, right? Because you need to be taking care of your child. and you need to bring your child along, but they won't let you bring the child along. So there's a lot of people that come to me who have already gone this route. They've tried so many times, but they don't fit in that box. They can't make it happen for whatever reason. Or maybe, you know, there's just too much that the organization can't handle, right? Maybe there's too many tasks the animal needs to be trained. And that's when people will either come to me saying, hey, I need more education on this. Hey, I'm thinking about this. Is this a good idea? Should I be doing this? Is this the right choice for me? Or maybe we should have an emotional support animal. Is that a better option for us, right? And I'm here to help them make that choice and that decision, as well as to educate them on the topic of, you know, if this is a good decision for you, then what's next? Right?
And you actually do the training with local families to make them service?
Yes. So I have both local clients and I have clients online.
Okay.
So there I have an online course where I have all sorts of trainings. I have accountability calls. We have monthly coaching. And really, you know, what I tell people when they come into my program is that, like, don't worry about being a number, because you're not a number. Like, this is a personal relationship I'm building with you, and I'm contacting you all the time. Like, if anything, you know, you're going to be running away from me. I'm following up with you so much. That's why this works. And a lot of people are very hesitant online because they're like, well, we're just going to fall away and become a number, right? Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. So does the dog, though, eventually need to be a certified service dog to enable
I love that question. Yes, I love that question, because in this age, everybody is used to having everything regulated and having certifications. Now, and I actually go through this in my workshop, and it can be unnerving for a lot of people too. Like, oh my gosh, there's no need for a certification. I can provide you a certification if you want one. I can say you've gone through the hours. I can say you've gone through the training. I can say X, Y, Z, right? But in the end, it's, are you a person who has a dog that can do their job and that they act good in public? So what the ADA has for service dogs is that they need to have certain standards of how they act and how they respond, because the thing is, a lot of people are going online for these fake certifications and the dogs aren't trained. That's dangerous, right? So think about it from that way. You know it's a real service dog when they act like a service dog. If you want that extra feeling of safety and comfort from a certification, I can provide that to you. However, my main concern is how your dog is acting and how they are behaving.
Well, you were talking about how emotional support animals were only allowed in travel and housing. So you're saying, I'm thinking that service animals or autism assistance dogs are allowed in stores and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Are they not? And if so, then don't you need a certification?
So it's the U.S. law is so interesting, Mary, because it's different from a lot of other countries' laws. So from a service dog, you actually don't need that certification. You don't need a doctor's note. However, if you have a dog such as a psychiatric service dog, according to the DOT, in order to travel, you do need to have a prescription for that psychiatric service dog, specifically psychiatric service dog. According to a lot of different organizations like housing and travel organizations, if the disability is not visible, you need paperwork. Okay. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. I know some blind individuals, you know, have service dogs, and they have like special things on them to indicate, like, I'm a service dog, like, don't touch me. Or like, I'm allowed to be here, kind of, you know, banner around the dog. Do you suggest that for autism assistance dogs?
Yeah, it can make things easier. However, I wouldn't make that an expectation that everyone's going to read or understand. Because like we mentioned earlier on in this interview, there's a lot of misinformation And, people with ESAs might have those vests on them, and they'll say, oh yeah, you can pet
What's
my
an
ESA.
ESA?
That's an emotional support animal.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
So there is a lot of confusion, and it definitely helps. It
yeah,
definitely helps, but don't expect it to solve everybody trying to touch your dog.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so if people are like, I learned a lot about different animals and their uses, and it's okay to just get a family pet too. Like,
Absolutely.
you don't have to
Absolutely.
get an emotional support or train the animal to do anything during um to help your child specifically with autism. I mean, that's probably what 95% of the people listening will and should do is if they like animals and they think it might help, to get an animal and get it trained well by somebody that, or learn to train it well with positive behavioral strategies. So if people are interested in learning more about service assistance animals or service animals or emotional support animals, how can they find you on your website?
Yes, so I do have a website. It is primarily for, my general animal training clients, which would be caitlynsanimals.com. However, I'm sure for a lot of you guys who maybe want to learn more about the differences and, if it's a good road for you guys to take, would be my Facebook group. So it's called Service Dog Prep. And if you're interested in joining, every once in a while, about once a month, I do host a free workshop.
That's probably the best way to find is join the Facebook group. So we'll link both Caitlyn'sAnimals.com, and Caitlyn is spelled CAITLINS, Caitlyn'sAnimals.com, and then also Service Dog Prep is the Facebook group you can join. So before I let you go, part of my podcast goals is for parents, professionals to be less stressed and lead happier lives. So do you have any self-care tips or stress management strategies you use to lead a happier life?
Yes, I do. I think that the ability to be able to clear your head, refocus, and see the big picture is a fantastic way to de-stress from all the immediate things that might be pulling your attention away. So meditation helps me do that. I find that when I meditate, even if it's just for 5 minutes, 60 seconds, everyone has a different amount of time they're able to do this. But even if I just sit down for 60 seconds, close my eyes, take a few deep breaths, and become aware of my body and my surrounding environment, and just push whatever nagging thoughts I have, really helps me refocus and calm down and see the big picture.
Awesome. Well, I think that's excellent. I think meditation is great. And I think you know a ton about animals. So thank you for your time today to explain all the different ways we can use animals to help our kids with autism. So thanks for your time, and we'll be checking out your resources.